Okay, I think we should be good, Kendall. Do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
All right, well, welcome everybody to the Energy Waste Reduction Committee. This is our November meeting. Ben already mentioned we are recording this meeting because there's a lot of interest from folks who weren't able to join us. Please introduce yourself by putting your name and your organization in the chat. We're going to kick off today just giving, because we have so many new people here today, we're just going to give a very brief overview of what the Green Task Force is and what the EWR committee is. And then we'll talk about some of the recent Detroit home repair programs. Ben will get into that, and then just give a little sneak peek for our follow-up meeting in December to this panel discussion. And then we will get into the panel discussion, which we hope to spend the majority of the meeting on intersections of home repair and energy efficiency programs. And at the end, if we have any time, we'd like to do just a quick group updates and announcements. So with that, I will move on to the next slide. So the Detroit.
Hey, Kendall, sorry to cut you off, but your screen is maybe like 80%. Like the left side is cut off. It's a little zoomed.
Okay, how's that?
Still looks like it. Could you unshare and then try share again? It was good for a minute.
Yep, let me. All right, sorry here.
I'm reading a new book.
Okay, how's that?
Oh, much perfect.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. All right, so just wanted to give a brief overview. Let me go to the back about what the Detroit Green Task Force is. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Detroit City Council Green Task Force, we advise council on green principles and practices to better serve the city of Detroit. Councilman Scott Benson is the current task force chair, and Kerwin Wimberly, and I don't know if they're here right now. He is the president of the Green Task Force. So we work in partnership with the City of Detroit and the Office of Sustainability, which those of you that aren't aware, the city is in process of hiring a new sustainability director. So these are just some of the 7 committees that are active on the Green Task Force, including us, the Energy Waste Reduction Committee. And so just a little bit about us. Ben and I formed this committee in March of 2019. The purpose of the committee is to identify opportunities for increasing access to energy efficiency programs and resources for all Detroiters. So we do work across residential, commercial, and municipal sectors, and we're here to influence policy and inform the public on how and why to reduce energy waste. So very quickly, one of our main focuses the past couple of years has been adopting a Detroit commercial and multifamily energy and water benchmarking ordinance. So we've updated, we've been working on this with the committee for a couple of years now. This ordinance, similar to Ann Arbor's, would require building owners to report their energy and water usage. This is not a requirement for building owners to make any energy efficiency upgrades. And then lastly, just wanted to share that we do meet virtually, at least currently we're virtual only, the second Tuesday of every month. And we will put a link in the chat where you can subscribe to receive our emails about meeting notifications. And I did mention the benchmarking ordinance. So this is just a map of existing benchmarking policies in the US currently. Ann Arbor was the first city in Michigan last year to adopt a policy, and we're hoping to get Detroit on the map soon. And then in December, we're going to have another special meeting and hopefully a good follow-up to today's panel discussion on an all-electric home in Detroit that achieves are familiar with the HERS index. So we will make sure that everybody has information for how to join this. This will be the homeowner and contractors and an in-depth presentation on how the home achieved that score. For those of you that aren't familiar with what a HERS score is, it is a home energy rating system. So it is an industry standard by which a home's energy efficiency is measured. So if you look at the chart to the right, the lower the score means the home is more energy efficient. Current energy code would require a home to have a HERS index score of 100. So the home that we're going to be presenting on in December did achieve the HERS score of 40. A zero energy home would have a HERS score of 0. So we're looking forward to sharing that home's story with the committee. And with that, I will turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Kendall. Hey, everybody. Ben DeWicki with Walker Miller Energy Services here, and I co-chair the EWR committee with Kendall. Today, we are going to be focused on the residential sector, and specifically homes in Detroit, and how we can utilize and cross-collaborate between programs to achieve not only the home repair volume that we need to see in Detroit, but specifically how we can pair that up with energy efficiency programs and start the conversation about also segueing those even into electrification programs, and really how Detroit can be a model for the rest of the state and the rest of the country in the way that we approach these issues. So just briefly, energy waste reduction, which if you haven't heard that term, that was a term coined by Governor Snyder. It's just another way of saying energy efficiency, but that's sort of Michigan nomenclature. So EWR, energy waste reduction, has been getting a lot of attention of late, especially this year. There's just a few snippets on this slide, but we've seen everything from op-eds co-authored by representatives from the UP and Detroit, our own Councilwoman Gabriela Santiago Romero. We've seen huge proposals being put into the state legislature. That's $1.65 billion for the My Affordable Healthy Homes proposal, which has got some steam. And it's also listed as a key strategy in the My Healthy Climate Plan, which is Michigan's climate action plan. Specifically, they call for the repair and decarbonization of homes and businesses as one of their 6 key strategies, and doing so while committing to environmental justice and pursuing a just transition as part of that. And so we know that here in Detroit, it's not as easy as just decarbonizing homes, as making them more energy efficient, but we have a housing crisis here in the city, and a home repair crisis that we need to address in order to effectively tackle and move on to the energy efficiency, the affordability, and eventually the decarbonization of these homes. So we can go to the next slide, Kendall. So one of the things that we started to look at, Kendall and I, over the last 6 to 8 months was, boy, there sure are a lot of programs in this city that are focused on either home repair or energy efficiency. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's just to kind of give you all an idea of how many resources there are out there. And while we see a lot of these programs, living within the same departments or collaborating to some degree, we are seeing that some of them specifically, and those we're going to be talking about today, are collaborating extremely effectively to provide what I heard last week at a low-income energy policy summit in Lansing, referred to as continuity of care, which I love. And that's a medical term typically, and I looked up a definition, and it's defined as the process by which a patient and the physician-led care team are cooperatively involved in ongoing healthcare management toward the shared goal of higher quality, cost-effective medical care. And I love that definition as applied to how we treat folks in their homes and how we work collaboratively between programs to provide that high quality, cost-effective care to strengthen our communities, to tackle housing affordability, to tackle the health and safety issues that we see in homes, and ultimately to move toward our climate goals as really a bonus, but really increasingly the impetus of why we're doing a lot of this work. So today we've got 4 folks, if you want to go to the next slide, Kendall, that are in working on 4 different programs, starting with Renew Detroit with Heather Zygmontowicz. We've also got the Weatherization Assistance Program represented here with Wayne Metro's Michele Robinson, the Detroit Home Repair Fund, Darnell Adams, and lastly, the Energy Efficiency Assistance Program, which is DTE, and we've got David Becker here. And we've got a really, we're seeing that, and they'll go into it much more, but the Renew Detroit program and the Weatherization program have got this really incredible collaboration that they're working toward, as we see also in the Detroit Home Repair Fund and the EEA program. So they are working to effectively combine resources, or to work closely together to say, okay, we've got homes that are being repaired here, and we've got resources to do that. And then over here, we've got resources for energy efficiency. One of the big problems that I'm sure many of you are aware of is that energy efficiency, homes that are otherwise eligible for energy efficiency and weatherization are deferred. Historically, there have been deferral or walkaway rates between 50 and 75% in the city of Detroit for otherwise income eligible homes. So how do we make sure that we're not doing that, that we're making sure that we not only address those home repair issues, but that there is that continuity of care and that we're handing these folks off directly to the energy efficiency or eventually these electrification programs without folks having to get, go through dozens of forms and paperwork, multiple audits of their home or assessments, but to provide that high quality, cost-effective care. So with that, I'm going to ask each of our presenters, starting with Heather, to just do a quick introduction, introduce yourself, and a little bit about the program that you represent.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. So I'm Heather Zygmontowicz, and I'm with the city of Detroit. So the programs that I'm most actively working on right now really is Renew Detroit, which is an American Rescue Plan or ARPA funded home repair program. We initially put in or committed $30 million in coordination with City Council last year, and we've since been lucky enough to secure an additional $15 million in coordination with the state legislature, also of ARPA funding. So all in, we have $45 million. We originally committed to doing 1,500 home repairs with that, and now we are confirmed at doing 2,000 altogether with the 45 million. Definitely would have hoped that we would have kept the same ratio, but with what's been happening with construction costs this year, we thought we'd play it safe and make sure that all 2,000 people are covered before we expand a little bit beyond that. So if you're not familiar with Renew Detroit, what we do is we're looking at primarily roof replacements. The first phase, we said 1,000 roof replacements only. We continue to see a very, very high rate of need for roof replacements. So when we opened up into phase 2, there was an open question of whether or not we would do something totally different like plumbing or electrical. But since the need was still so high, we went with that. And that again, in addition to windows. So I think that's covering the list of things that I see we have to go over, hopefully.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Heather. We'll get more into it in a minute. I will turn it now to Michele.
Good morning. I'm used to Zoom at this point, so still locating the mute button in Teams. So eventually, we'll all get the hang of it. My name is Michele Robinson. I am the Executive Director of Green and Healthy Homes with Wayne Metro, and I am here to talk about the Weatherization Assistance Program. So let's call it WAP, and then just internally, Weatherization. Here at the agency with Weatherization, we service all of Wayne County, and roughly about 70% of our unit coverage is in the city of Detroit. And in speaking to those deferral issues earlier, that's where with the weatherization program, we've had to get really creative and really innovative in our strategy to holistically serve the community and meet those program outcomes. So in addition to weatherization, we've also been able to partner with some very crucial individuals. Most are on this call already. City of Detroit, Gilbert Family Foundation, DTE. We've also gotten some other flexible funding. We had some weatherization deferral funds this year from the Department of Energy, which is our primary funding source for the weatherization program, primarily funded through the Department of Energy. We also received some supplemental funding through LIHEAP. And as of about a week ago, the expansion, so through the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, our weatherization program is expected to grow over the next 5 years. So typically, we are allocated roughly about 300 units in the county. And over the next 5 years, through the bill legislation, that's going to roughly increase to another maybe 700 or 800 units. So we're kind of estimating somewhere in total, somewhere between 700 and 1,000 units per year over the next 5 years. And then also within that, implementing a multi-family strategy. So there are a lot of just really good things happening in the weatherization space. In addition to the work that we've done with this group, that's also allowed for some policy and some advocacy work. And just with some of the other flexible dollars and with some of the other partnerships, we've been able to go in and do a little more per home, as most of you are probably aware that our households need more assistance than the weatherization program can provide.
Thank you very much, Michele. And next we'll have Darnell.
Everybody, can you guys hear me okay? My name is Darnell. I am the Director of Detroit Community Initiatives at the Gilbert Family Foundation. I'll be here to talk about, with my friend David Becker, the Detroit Home Repair Fund, which we internally call DERF. The program was stood up with a philanthropic investment of $20 million from $10 million from the Gilbert Family Foundation, $8 million from Medica, and $2 million from the DTE Foundation. We have three program teams helping to usher this work, which is Enterprise Community Partners, Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, and then of course DTE's EEA program. We have 8 different nonprofit partners. We think that the nonprofit partners are the best partners to work with because they are on the ground working with residents every day. And these are all partners who are part of the DTE EEA program. So we have CDC, which is Detroit Christian, Third Corps Detroit. Detroit is working for environmental justice, Eastside Community Network, EcoWorks, Matrix Human Services, UCHC, and of course Wayne Metro. Our goal is to holistically service 1,000 houses over the next 3 years. The fund itself is a gap filler, and it's to leverage other existing home repair programs. So the idea is that, to Michele's point, where the program requires more assistance, right? Where the program is needs more assistance, these are gap dollars that can come in and help support the program or that home.
Thanks, Darnell. And lastly, we'll turn it to David. Nope. He was with us the whole time. David, you're muted if you're trying to talk. Also off camera now.
Oh man, of all the times for poor network quality. I'm trying to get to a better spot where I have better connectivity. Can you all hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Yep.
Sweet. Okay, apologies for that. Okay, well, I missed the tail end of what Darnell said there, but yeah, I'm David Becker at DTE. I'm a marketing program manager, and primarily oversee the Energy Efficiency Assistance Program, um, which basically delivers energy efficiency to income qualified customers at 200% FPL and below, 80% AMI, with also a small carve out for the 2 to 300% of FPL. And the program leverages those community partners, so the ones that Darnell had mentioned, plus another 20, 25 in the communities to deliver the program to the communities. And that's been a great avenue for us to get in the communities and meet the need of the residents in those communities. Wayne Metro, of course, being one of those partners as well. We have a mix of the Weatherization Assistance Program partners that are able to braid our dollars, which has become increasingly helpful with the influx of additional funds through WAP, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill, and just meeting cost effectiveness. And so we're very thankful for the partnerships we have with all the weatherization assistance partners, as well as the nonprofits. And the nonprofits bring a little, a little different flavor to the table. A lot of them have other missions and goals they're working on, whether it's, working with immigrants in our communities, working on lead paint remediation, working on, home foreclosure and home ownership. And so we're able to leverage the program, and they're able to leverage the program to better expand on their mission, and allows us to reach other segments of the population. We saw a need for additional home repair resources. It's been an ongoing need for a while now, but in 2020 we were able to pass, as part of our energy waste reduction rate plan, a health and safety pilot. And big thanks to the Michigan Public Service Commission for their support on this initiative, as well as the various stakeholders. But with those funds, we're able to address home repair needs like roof repair, water infiltration reduction, electrical upgrades, that would typically prevent us from providing weatherization services to these customers. And it's been very, very helpful. It's about $2 million a year. And we were able to extend that for 2022 and 2023. But there are also limitations with those funds and what we can do in the home. And so very excited to have the Detroit Home Repair Fund that Darnell highlighted, and the coalition that we've built to support that work, where we can provide home repair services that go above and beyond just those related to energy efficiency, and really get at the health of the occupants. And I think we're going to see some tremendous health outcomes from this work. Of course, $20 million is a lot of money, but we can always use more. And so I think we just need to stay vigilant on trying to get as much funding as we can around this issue, because the benefits coming out of this work are tremendous when you're talking about equity, and you're talking about climate change, and you're talking about the health of those residents. You're talking about being able to afford the energy bills going forward. It's just, there's so many benefits entwined with this work. And so excited to talk about this further today. And thanks, Ben, for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. So as you all can see, we've got a great panel. I'm going to jump right in and start with a question for both Heather and Michele. So Heather, you talked about Renew Detroit, and how the first and now some of the second phases of that program is focused on fixing roofs. Roofs are historically a huge issue for deferrals, representing some 50% of the deferrals and walkaways from weatherization, otherwise weatherization eligible homes. So you all are, Renew Detroit and Wayne Metro and Weatherization Assistance Program are working very closely together to collaborate. And on paper, this seems like a very natural synergy between these two programs, but we all know that it's not always that easy. And so I was hoping you all could speak a little bit to the nature of this collaboration and how it came to be where it is today.
So I'll start and then let Michele fill in some of it. I think for us at the city, the biggest thing was, I think there's like that ongoing frustration. So we know that there's way more need than we could possibly have the money for, even when we're throwing millions and millions of dollars at it. But I think there's it's definitely from the city end, from my end, an equal frustration of understanding how limited the capacity can be, because single family homes are single family homes. Everyone is unique. And so you not only need skilled labor in order to do this work, but you really have to be flexible in how you deploy the work. And so knowing, like, I know some of the really tough conversations we had with our council members at the time we were talking about these dollars, who were saying, why can't we put in 50 million? Why can't we put in 100 million? Why can't we put in more? And like, the honest answer was, like, I had to legitimately sit there and say, I don't know if I can spend it that fast. Like, that was the honest answer. And so what we were really thinking about was, how can I set this up to spend fast but not inefficiently? So like, how do I maximize that? And so the key thing was doing it in volume. But the other thing was, if I know that I have to limit my spend, how do I make it so that other people can benefit from what I'm doing? And so that's when, like, I was really tasked with sitting down and thinking, like, is there a specific pipeline that I can work from, or is there a pipeline that we can send to once people get through this work? And I think that's where many people before me were already having these conversations, and I just had the benefit of being able to receive and think about that information critically. And so I think there's more to it than that, definitely, but I want to let Michele talk about, like, what the deferral rates and how that became like a very natural partnership.
Yes, so Heather, we both kind of benefited from a lot of just previous work and conversation. Part of what was happening in the weatherization space in general is we were experiencing roughly about a 70 to 80% deferral rate. And your common deferral reasons, major ones were roofs, obviously. So that's typically, if you rate them, the roof is typically that number one. And then you also had like knob and tube wiring, asbestos, and then there were some of the other household issues. So we were already working with certain other departments, well, other teams within the housing and revitalization program. So some important linkages with senior home repair, the lead program, and then we were also doing some work with community health corps. So a lot of what had happened was just in a lot of like these identifying gaps and trying to fill those gaps. So essentially, we were doing a bit of a very informal gaps analysis based on what we were seeing with our client intakes and some of the other synergy that was happening on our end, because as we were doing intakes in the past, the way that the program was structured, we would bring a client in, do the client intake, and then you would get to the home and find all of these deferrals. And so at this point, the client's at a stop, and even program staff were at a bit of a disadvantage because we weren't able to explain to the client fully, okay, here's what weatherization can do, here's what it can't do, and here are the other challenges. So in all of us kind of bringing all of these groups together, and it kind of happened organically. There were teams within HRD, DTE Energy. So there were just a lot of different groups where we just all started coming together organically and saying, here are all of the things in the ecosystem. How do we put this together and do it in a very strategic way? So on our end, we had created a home assessment, and that home assessment, it was to help us in that process so that we could proactively see what was going on with the home so that we had a stream of communication for our clients. So that home assessment tool, and I know that Karen McDonald isn't on this call, but her and the work that John Carmody do, very pivotal to that assessment, that has started a lot of the conversation within the ecosystem as a whole. So at this point, we now know holistically, here's what's going on with the structure. And now we're better able to pair with some of the other programs. So there was a lot of work and a lot of conversations happening over the last couple of years to get us to this space.
Great. Thank you both. So I'll turn now to Darnell and David and sort of ask a similar question, but you all have, in your introduction, spoke about the collaborations between the Detroit Home Repair Fund and the Energy Efficiency Assistance Program. So one of the stated goals, kind of as a follow-up to Michele's point of Detroit Home Repair Fund, is to holistically address Detroit housing stability by leveraging multiple home repair resources at once. And I know that the first track of the Home Repair Fund is available to community partners already working with DTE's EEA program, as you mentioned, Darnell. So again, similar question, can you all speak to the nature, a little bit more about the nature of the collaboration, and again, how it came to be what it is today?
Yeah, it's actually I'll try to keep it brief, but it's a funny story. I felt like it started on a Wednesday at Hudson Cafe with Ruth Ann Norton from Green and Healthy Homes Initiative and Rachel and Nick from ProMedica. They come into town and they wanted to pick our brain about their fundraising, trying to do this whole sort of green and healthy home approach, focusing on the health of the individual and not necessarily the repair first. And it was the first time I think I've ever heard someone approach it from a health outcome perspective versus a home repair perspective. And it was very intriguing. And so as we continued that conversation, I was also thinking about the long game, which is how to put more money into this pot. And so I ended up meeting with Melinda Clemens at Enterprise Community Partners because the CDO fund is sitting there where you have Kresge, Ralph C. Wilson, Kellogg, and other funders that are pouring dollars into different initiatives. And so we wanted to land our dollars there and have them operate the program. And Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, again, we didn't want to lose them. We knew that they have this vision of a whole home repair approach, but also they have a lot of connections to the federal level to advocate for changes with federal programs. And so as we started exploring who the right partners were to do this work with, we realized that we had been talking to David as well, and it all just kind of came together very, very fast. It feels like 5 years ago, but we really pulled this program together between January and April of this year, which was kind of crazy to do, but it made the most sense. The biggest thing that we needed to focus on, though, was eligibility. We wanted to be in alignment with the city's program. So for Renew Detroit, you need to have an approved HOPE application. However, we know how lengthy that process can be, so we wanted folks to just apply for a HOPE application. Now, the other piece to this was DTE has its own income eligibility, and we were able to successfully use HOPE as one of the income criterias to make someone eligible for DTE's program. So I think the big piece was we were able to align our programs very neatly as far as the eligibility components, and it also helped as we think about saving dollars at the household level. If you have a HOPE application, you get approved, you're saving money every single year in your taxes, which gives you more funds to do more home improvements if you choose to out of your own pocket or anything else. But it was also a way for us to leverage the city's programs as well. So I would say it happened really fast, and it's working very well. We're leveraging each other's programs very neatly. And I'll stop for a sec. I'll let Dave jump in, but it's working very well right now with the partners.
That's awesome. Thanks, Darnell. It's so funny because it was probably the same Wednesday. I just met with them at the Great Lakes roasting plant.
Probably was.
Yeah, in Washington, and but same thing, and it was with Ruth Ann and Green Healthy Homes Initiative and ProMedica with Rachel, and I'd had conversations with Kevin Chan from GHHI previous to that, and he was letting me know that this impact fund and this initiative that was underway to try to better address like healthcare issues and how do we actually get to like the root of a lot of like the problems with health stem from the house, and how can we do I know community partners that can maybe help with some of this funding that's going to be coming our way in Detroit, and it was it was a remarkable conversation just because of all these intersections. And I think that's what's been so great about this coalition is we all intersected at different points. But we all had the same goal in place, which was when we're in this customer's home, how can we holistically serve and service this customer? And even the work Heather's doing with Renew, it was like, well, there's this Renew program, and there's this over here, and we have the health and safety pilot, and we have the energy efficiency assistance, and we can provide furnaces and water heaters, and we're all just riffing off each other, and it's like, man, this is awesome. Like, can this become a thing? And then we had Gwen Gell, who was at UCHC, United Community Housing Coalition, and so she had been an EA partner as well, and was very close to that work. And then she'd moved over to the Rocket Community Fund, and she was also trying to figure out how do we address home repair issues. And it just seemed like the worlds were colliding, and the coalition was forming without us really knowing it. I mean, it just happened so organically. And like Darnell said, it was like, wow, I think there's definitely something here. But then how do we actually, I mean, to move it as fast as it did, and things don't usually move that quickly. And I think like I give a lot of kudos to the organizations that we all work for, DT included, to empower and trust us to kind of work and push these initiatives forward as quickly as they happened. And it's just like passionate individuals coming together around the same topics. And it's worked out great, and we're just getting started. I think that's the main thing is like, this is just getting started. Like Heather said, it's, at first the concern is, can we spend the dollars? Now I think the next concern is, can we get more dollars? Because we know the need is there. There's so much money going into space right now. There's a lot of workforce development that's underway right now that DT is trying to spur as well. And I think once we get the contractors on board to start weatherizing these homes, we're gonna have a dramatic impact in the city. And I think we're gonna have a great model that we can hopefully even take elsewhere. But for right now, it's great. The need is in Detroit. We're happy to meet that need.
I did want to add one more thing. Again, we're trying we're trying to break a broken system, which is kind of crazy to say that, but that was a reality of it. We're trying to pull all resources together to achieve a holistic home repairs. And in doing so, we all know that some of the home repair programs require reimbursements for even like staffing. And so in the Detroit Home Repair Fund, we committed staffing allocations to ensure that the program didn't have any bumps or breaks or, loss of staff. It was like guaranteed funding was in place to ensure you could do this work. We also worked to build out the right systems for communication. So similar to Wayne Metro, Gwen was able to develop Gwen Gill from Rocket Community Fund was able to develop a pronto form for each partner. And it wasn't just a basic pronto form. This form for this home assessment piece also incorporated all of DTE's needs. So it allowed partners to pull that information at one time and then be able to put it into the DTE system later when they got back to the home, back to the office. We also, excuse me, built out through Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. They're the TA provider for all the partners. Built out a CRM system where they could sort of work each home through the system from home assessment all the way through to home repair completion. So there was a lot of work that took place to get the program to where it is today, but it's humming.
Excellent. I want to make a note that if folks have questions, comments, pop them in the chat. We may or may not get to all of them, but we'd like to see that, wondering what your thoughts as we go along are. I'm going to follow up with that real quick and ask that, you all have got several months of collaboration under your belt, going on a year for some of these programs. And I'm wondering if there's any, those planning months and those getting things off the ground. Definitely there's some challenges that you have to overcome. And, one of the points of putting on this panel is to consider how we might expand this concept of collaboration. Is there any particular lessons learned that you all took away that you said, well, next time if we do this, we'll definitely do it this way instead of that way?
I'll say one thing really quick, because I think what's actually really fascinating is that all of us, like both Michelle and I, are like, a lot of work happened before us, and I think both Darnell and David were like, this actually happened very organically, and I think we're all saying the same thing, which is like, I think it looks like everybody's favorite term, an overnight success, and it's literally because all of our organizations have been meeting and talking and like obsessing over this problem for so long. And I think like we actually finally got lucky enough that like all of our paths crossed, because like I'm not just partnered with Michelle, like I'm also partnered with Darnell and like in talks with David. And I think all of us have connections with each other. So that would be like the only thing that I'd say, which is just reinforcing um both how lucky we are that our employers maybe have empowered us to have those conversations, or maybe ignored it when we would slip away for whatever breakfast meeting how many years ago when maybe we didn't have the authority to do that, and luckily now we do because something came out of it. But like keeping in touch with each other and really prioritizing like what we're passionate about, which was like trying to fix this issue, I think is really what's helped move this forward eventually. So that's probably just the main thing I'd say there.
The one thing that I would say is when we launched the Detroit Home Repair Fund, we received 120,000 calls the very next day, which overwhelmed us, and we've received over maybe 275,000 calls at this point. The one thing I wish we would have done is sort of get a subjective survey completed for each homeowner that called to just kind of know what is it that is like what's a home repair that you need the most help with, or how many home repairs, like just something that would give us a better understanding of what's happening on the ground. I think we all sort of know that weatherization is number one, and then roof and windows and doors are like the kind of come afterwards, and stairs, of course. But it would have been great to just capture all of that data up front so that we all knew what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback on that one, Darnell. And then Ben, I know I saw a hand raised before you posted this question, so I don't know if we want to go to that person who's got their hand up. But yeah, I think you're totally right. And Darnell, we did a quick, I thought a nice quick pivot to say at least to screen them on the front end. If they didn't have a working furnace or hot water heater, then they just got pushed directly to the DTE EA program. Because that was that was really good to know, obviously, because those folks are in a more immediate need. But I think one of the challenges, and we're still dealing with it now, honestly, is do we prioritize need, and how do you prioritize need? And Michael McKnight from GHHI brought up a great point that not every person doesn't really understand the emergency they're in, right? And unless if you're educated and you know black mold is bad, then you understand the emergency of having your children in a basement bedroom with black mold. But if you're not educated, you might not understand that emergency that you're actually under. And so by prioritizing based on, I don't know if it's like the squeakiest wheel or those that know, you're pushing those that might be in just as much need, but just don't know how to say it to the side as well. And I know, and Heather with Renew, you've had to, have that prioritization score and everything else. And I think that's worked well for that program. And, it's one of the things I was reflecting on. I was like, do we need to have some sort of prioritization scale? Because as Darnell mentioned, the need was so great. We wanted to make a big splash. We wanted to drum a lot of interest in the program or the initiative. Well, we did that. And now it's like, okay, well, now we have all these customers, and, right now we're servicing them on a first come, first served basis. But it's challenging because, as Darnell said, because we didn't gather those kind of survey points on the front end, we don't have a full picture of the varying degrees of need. And again, when you slice up need, I think it just gets so complicated, because I think any of these customers calling in are probably in need, and it's just trying to, you're kind of slivering hairs at that point. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I was just,
Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
no, I'm sorry. I was going to chime in because on the weatherization side, we do have some prioritization measures. However, what ends up happening is because the need is so great, and with weatherization, there's some flexibilities that aren't exactly there. So when you're not able to leverage, or if you're wherever you're at in the program year and trying to put the pieces to the puzzle together, sometimes what happens is the most vulnerable sometimes have higher average costs to actually address the situation. So what we find at times is that the most vulnerable household ends up getting deferred, or they're moved further toward the end or middle of the program just because of where we are with dollars, flexibility, and some of those other things. That's why working with this group has been so vital, because what it does is having these additional resources and these conversations, it's allowed us to get to those homes at a faster rate. And the GHHI team also, we met with them as well. They actually stopped by Lakeshore, so we didn't have to leave the office. And I'm also going to answer one of the questions in the chat. Wayne Metro is also the administrator of the Water Residential Assistance Program, known to most as RAP. RAP covers the Great Lakes Water Authority service area. As part of the RAP program, there are home water audits. It's based primarily on water usage. So within the home water audit, we will physically go into an individual's home, do water and energy education. There are some things, replacement of like shower heads, faucets, aerators, when there are funds available. Servicing, we partnered with DWSD a couple of years ago with like low flow toilets. So there are those things out there in the water conservation space, and that space is continuing to grow.
Thank you, Michele. Just want to acknowledge Joel. I see you with your hand up over there. If you could drop your question in the chat, we'll try and get to it organically. But we got a couple more questions that we'll do. Kendall, I'm going to turn it to you for tracking results.
All right, thank you. So I think some of the questions were answered. Irma Leapart, yeah, I had a question about programs including water efficiency and services. Let me see what else we have here. So yeah, and I think KT's question was answered by Heather. I guess Irma or KT, did you have any additional questions you wanted to ask, both around water efficiency services, disconnecting downspouts, and KT on, you know, focusing these home repair programs and weatherization in EJ communities?
Hi,
And if
Kendall.
Hi,
No,
Irma.
I didn't have anything additional. One of the things I don't think is happening that I think residents could really benefit though is the disconnecting downspouts. And I don't think there are any programs, but that's important because we have flooding. So as you all doing this, you know, energy efficiency, that you're recognizing basement, you know, mold and that kind of thing. And disconnecting the downspouts could really help with that, and also help with our stormwater issue and potentially flooding. So if that can be added to anyone's list, it would be great. Another workforce development initiative potentially as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Irma. Yeah, and I guess related to that with disconnecting downspouts, you know, earlier this week, Cures at Wayne State University had a webinar. I wasn't unable to join, but it was on, you know, learning more about green infrastructure and as it relates to mold and mold toxins. And this was specific to the Jefferson Chalmers community. But I think with disconnecting downspouts, you know, then you have to do a careful, you have to make sure you're managing your stormwater well on that property. Otherwise, it will eventually become an issue at that property as well, with some potential basement flooding during heavy rainstorms. So there's a lot more tied in with stormwater management that should be looked at with these other energy efficiency and weatherization programs. And I don't know if they already are kind of tied in, if stormwater management specifically is.
Hi, this is KT and Andreski, also with Free Detroit. And I just wanted to add to the environmental justice aspect. It's good to see in the chat that you worked with the Gordie Howe Bridge and are continuing to work with Factory Zero. I think that there's a huge incentive here for these factories to kind of do what's right for the communities most around them. but it also, helps them get to their climate neutrality, which isn't the best form of measurement, as we all know. But I did want to really just point out too that State Senator Stephanie Chang has a really great legislation out there, a bill that is not passed yet, but would provide funding possibly for initiatives like this if it does go through, for polluting facilities that can't stop polluting, and putting money towards the communities that are most affected. Detroit, almost the entire city of Detroit is environmental justice a community, right? So I think that righting those wrongs and understanding that a lot of our air quality and asthma and health problems are from these facilities, I would really love to see them starting to pay up to better the communities that are around them because of the injustices that we've endured for multiple generations. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks.
KT.
Yeah,
Great
thanks,
comment.
KT. And yeah, before we move on to the next panel question, I wanted to give Joel the opportunity to unmute and ask his question, or we'll move on. And then Robert Saxon, I see your question. We are going to be talking a little bit about workforce in later. So if you don't mind just holding on to that question until we get to that part of the discussion. But Joel, did you want to ask your question to the panelist?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I don't have chat on my Teams, but anyway, so good to see everybody on the call, and good to see how far this stuff has moved since our efficient homes work group. We convened after the sustainability action agenda, so it's awesome. It's really exciting. I'm fans of all your work, of course. I'm curious. So in we have over $200 million coming to Michigan through the Inflation Reduction Act for home electrification and home efficiency, and probably hundreds of millions and more just maybe for weatherization as well. So obviously, y'all are spending some pretty big sums, but that's going to probably be dwarfed by those dollars. So I'm just curious, as practitioners in the field, like what do you see as the bottlenecks, capacity constraints, and how do we, as communities throughout the state, help get ready and get revved up to expend this money efficiently, but also address again those most vulnerable members of our communities with that money, and then also kind of like how do we, and I have lots of thoughts about this, but how do we like leverage electrification, to improve people's quality of life outcomes in their homes? So I know, huge question, but that's just what's on my mind, and I appreciate the presentations and talk.
Joel, hey, it's David. Good to see you as well. And those work groups were, I mean, those are like the initial catalyst of a lot of this work. So thank you for all of your work and leadership in this space as well. I mean, I think the bottleneck is home repair. And when I was just, I just came from a conference, energy evaluation conference, and one of the main people who had helped, was making the sausage, right, of the bills. I posed a question around home repair because, you can't put solar panels on a tarp, was what I said, basically. And unfortunately, I think it was it's an oversight with the dollars, right? I mean, yeah, a ton of money coming in to do a lot of great work around electrification, solar panels, and electrical upgrades and heat pumps and everything else. But a lot of the housing stock that needs it most is not ready for electrification, unfortunately. And so I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you can help, Joel, because I think the one area where maybe we'll pull some funding out is that greenhouse gas reduction fund. They thought that maybe we could write a grant to try to get some more home repair dollars. But I think the 20 million we have is great, but it's, I think it's been estimated, $2 to $4 billion for the city of Detroit alone, according to U of M Poverty Solutions Lab. So we need more money for the home repair. I think it's going to get in the way of what Wayne Metro is trying to do in the Weatherization Assistance Program and spend down the bill dollars. I think there's a big need there. And I think contractor workforce, I think, is probably second line to that need. And I saw a question in the chat go, and You know, it's a small initiative, but DT has a contractor incubator workshop that's actually concluding soon through Walker Miller. It's I think 10, 11 contractors are going through that. And then we have 9 individuals going through BPI training. And it's a job placement program as well. So scratching the surface, but trying to get more resources out there for workforce as well.
Great. Well, I think I'm going to segue right into that actually. There's a lot of work to be done, and Joel, I appreciate you framing it, and another shout out to you, Joel, for convening that efficient homes work group, because it really was like a catalyst for a lot of what we're seeing today. So so the volume of just these 4 programs is really significant, and there's a substantial amount of labor and different kinds of labor. We've got roofers, we've got folks that are going in and doing environmental remediation and abatement, weatherization contractors doing insulation and air sealing, HVAC contractors doing heating and cooling increasingly systems. So just generally, can you all speak to currently how the availability of labor is affecting your ability to run these programs? And I'm curious specifically, Heather, you sort of alluded to matching the needs to the available workforce in your introduction, and I'm curious to know a little bit more about how you all have done that.
Yeah, so I'll take a crack at it because I think everybody, since everybody's thinking about it, I think we all approach it probably a little bit differently. So in like a former life when I was doing Rehabbed and Ready, or when we were starting Home Swap, what I would actually do is like we would work to get qualified contractors, and we asked for their bonding letter, and we didn't like ask for the bonding letter just for our contracts. We would literally be like, what is your actual bonded amount? Because I'm like, I don't even know where to start to come up with a baseline. And it's wild because then you actually like could add it up and you could say this collectively is the capacity if everybody did my work. And it's never that simple, but it's like we have to start thinking about ways to actually look at it. And I think, I mean, it's like we know so the best way that I could think of to address it was I was looking at that bonding number, and that bonding number was like hundreds of millions of dollars. And I knew I was maybe getting $3 million of work done a year. So I'm like, something's not adding up. And so it was really thinking about like, if this is technically what an insurance company or a bonding agent is saying these companies collectively could do, then how do I make my work more attractive so that one, the contractors want to do my work because we know that they're split in many different ways, and this is just one, thing indicating their potential work. But how do we make the work go faster? And so like that's why like I think you really hear like I don't want to say competing, but like 2 parallel paths, which is like Darnell and David are talking a lot about like the whole home. And I completely agree. Like I want to do the whole home, but I also was thinking like we don't have the funding to do it. So we like at the city, I think we were thinking more of like, how do we become a little bit more of a catalyst and just get to as many homes as possible? And then hopefully somebody else can potentially come in and think about the whole home approach once we've started something. And again, so it's all about working together. But yeah, I think what's crazy to me is that I've gotten more contact about work and about like being a contractor in the city of Detroit in the last 2 months than I probably have in the last 7 years combined. And that tells me that the way that we set up this program is like catching people and being like, oh, well, maybe that's something I'd like to do. And so like there's a new contractor that has somehow found my personal cell phone number every other day, and it is wild, but I'm not mad about it. We're just trying to get them to the right path. But that tells me that like if we structure the work in a way where a contractor can look at it and say that would help me, then they're more likely to come and do our work. And so for me, like doing single family homes, if you're a residential contractor who's not used to having large contracts, you have to go to every single house, you have to bid it out and spend that time, and there's a lot of wasted time. So it was thinking about like how can I line up as much as possible, and not everybody can do that. So you always have to have complements and offsets, but that's why I've been approaching it that way. I do still think like before, if you had ever asked me how many home repairs could you possibly do in a year, I think I would have said 400. I'm like maybe 400, like for one entity. And I think right now, if I structure it right this year, there's a chance we could get closer to 500 or 600 next year. I don't know it for sure, but I'm seeing numbers coming out of a very, very short period of time that are telling me if we prepare properly, we can scale this at a rate that really hasn't been seen yet. So I do think that there definitely is limited capacity. There's no question that like every week we meet with our contractors and we're like, you told us you had 5 crews and I see 2 in the field. So there's a very real shortage. But I do think a huge component of the workforce factor is how do you set up the work to make it work with what people have?
Yeah, Heather, I was going to chime in on that as well because we have a similar experience being that we're doing weatherization and home repair. And I noticed that Maddie Camille from the Bureau of Community Action is also on the call. They're our funder for the weatherization program. So a funder and a huge supporter of our work and that flexibility and growth within weatherization. So what we've done is kind of cast a bit of a wide net, kind of the same. We're getting more interest in weatherization and home repair in general now than ever before. The other thing that we did is that we've got some also in my department. I also oversee supportive housing and homeless services, participatory grant making, and some other teams that don't necessarily on the surface fit, but found some other individuals with some connections and some skill sets to get out there and do some outreach. So we've increased our outreach to contractors. The second thing that we've done with a lot of assistance from the Bureau is reduced a lot of barriers in getting contractors on board. And now with our innovation lab, we're also doing some workforce development. So we've got some cohorts for our green jobs, and we're switching the priority a bit. Our primary priority, what we found very organically, it's been our home water auditors where they've worked in conservation, but those individuals are now being interested in weatherization. So shifting a bit, the home water auditors and the energy auditors have become the top 2 positions in our workforce development phase. And then it's also kind of working with some other organizations that are doing some similar work and assisting each other with filling those gaps.
You going, Darnell?
No, go for it. I'll go
Are you
last.
sure?
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, because what Heather and Michelle were just talking about just yeah, triggered some things for me. I think on the EA, the Energy Efficiency Assistance Program with DT, so we're providing a rebate amount for each measure installed, and that goes to our community partner, and then they pay out the contractor. And we just had a call today just to review. We just got contractor feedback on our incentives to try to figure out, okay, do we need to increase incentives? Because like everything's getting more and more expensive. And so I think part of getting contractors on board is we have to be able to pay them an appropriate amount of money to do this work, which means organizations have to receive an appropriate amount of money to then solicit the contractor. And we always have this challenge with this program because obviously the more we increase incentives, the less customers we can serve and the less energy savings we get on behalf of the program. And with DTE on this program specifically, I have a spend goal to spend all the dollars. I also have a savings goal because at the entire portfolio level with energy waste reduction, we have savings targets we have to hit and meet. And this program is part of that. So we're always, even though we don't have to be technically cost effective, we always look at cost effectiveness because our spend to savings ratio, similar to weatherization assistance program, we still have savings goals. So that's our challenge, is trying to be cost effective while still being able to provide and support a contractor workforce to do this work. And I'll say on top of that, finding contractors that buy into this work and the community building aspect of the work and the mission of this work and those in need that we're servicing is critical as well. You have to find a contractor that's not just in it for the money. Because a lot of these homes they're going into as well are challenging homes and be challenging households to work with and challenging conditions. And so you need someone that's buying into it and can do a lot of jobs, because the margin on the work might not be the same margins they're going to get in other jobs. In fact, I'm sure it's not. And so that's one of the challenges we have in that contractor workforce. But in the years we've run the program, we've gotten contractors who have bought in, and those that have bought in love the work. And so we just need to continue finding those contractors, the right contractors, building up that workforce. But I think, yeah, I think obviously they got to get paid, but they also have to, I think, buy into some of the work we're doing as well, ideally.
So I just want to first give an applaud Heather, right? I think that when we think about Detroit's workforce ecosystem, Detroit, the city of Detroit is the biggest player in the field. Like, they have the most money, they have the most opportunities, and thinking critically like that, Heather, is going to help attract more contractors to the city, which is what we need. We've been talking about this since 2014 at the land bank, where and Rob Saxon knows this too. We've been struggling to figure this out. And I remember Deccan T. Men's Cole, former deputy director of the land bank, would always say, like, we just need to advertise every single house that needs repairs and put it out to the nation and attract people to Detroit. And obviously we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for Detroiters to take advantage of this first. And I think we're doing a lot of work to make that happen. One thing that the Gilbert Family Foundation launched in April was the Motor City Contractor Fund. It's a $10 million fund that's being used to basically help BIPOC contractors with any level of support that they need, capital, technical assistance, to really make them competitive for any job, whether it's commercial, residential, or from the city. And right now, we're working with mostly emerging and established firms, but as the program matures into its first year, once it comes out of this first year, it's going to enter a second phase where we're looking for more than novice contractors, someone who does a single family home repairs, but you can't really find them anywhere. It's just kind of word of mouth. And so want to pull those contractors to the table, provide the wraparound services that these other contractors are getting, so that we have a stronger pool of contractors that can help do this work. Last week we had an event for the Motor City Contractor Fund where the public was invited. We had our nonprofit partners from the Detroit Home Repair Fund attend. There were some organic connections made there with electricians and carpenters. And so I think it's really about exposing both ecosystems to from the work and to the workers, so that they can see each other, understand each other, and then naturally make that relationship work to help Detroiters.
Yeah, I love that comment, Darnell. And David, you alluded to the contractor incubator, the diverse contractor incubator program, and the BPI workforce development program that DTE is owning and funding, and Walker Miller is administering. And actually, so we're administering these two programs at the same time, and quite literally they're across the hall from each other. We have on one side last night, we have our 10 or 11 contractors, all in the city of Detroit, all diverse contractors that are learning about these opportunities and how to get involved in programs like the EEA. And on the other side of the hall, we've got a classroom of 8 people who are currently, just finishing up their BPI training. And last night we actually had a sort of like a mixer between the two, where we brought the trainees into this room with the contractors, and there was resumes going around, and there was handshakes going around, and there was introductions, and it was such a beautiful thing. And it was 10 contractors and 10 potential workers, but we need to be able to scale these. So I love that comment, and I think that we need to break that wide open if we're going to tackle these issues at scale. All right, so in as far as David, you mentioned earlier the health outcomes, and all of you seem to be having breakfast with Green and Healthy Homes. So Kevin, I'll expect my invite in a couple of days here. You can pick the place, that's fine. But the benefits of these programs are wide ranging, right? We've got comfort, we've got reducing energy burden, which in turn reduces housing insecurity, stabilizing infrastructure in neighborhoods, the economic benefit that comes out of the local labor and the workforce that we're just talking about, and then also climate and decarbonization benefits. So can you all speak a little bit to the way that your programs are starting to track the results of these efforts? Yeah.
I'll just do a quick chime in on that. So there's like a pretty hefty reporting requirement within the American Rescue Plan. And so that like it naturally comes with it. I think the main thing that I can say, and I'm super biased, but I set up this program like literally based on data. So like it really took out the individualized attention to every household before moving forward. Obviously, you can't do this work without eventually doing it, but I tried to put it on the back end instead of on the front end, so that we could push through and select people and then have our systems really focused on interacting with households once we were already beyond the point of selection. And so data has been literally integral to every single step that we're taking. So having good operations person, I literally could not be doing this work without our operations manager who has like architected all of this. And so now that we actually have been able to invest a little bit in like setting it up the right way, because I didn't have her when we started this, so it's very messy at the beginning. But we're able to really report out all kinds of things. And so even though we started with a prioritization score that was really based on factors that had nothing to do with the house, we then proceeded to set up our home assessment in a very, very similar way that we are now using to quote unquote score and help with our prioritization. And so it doesn't always have to be one thing or the other, but we are trying every step of the way to have some kind of databases so that if in a later conversation, we're like, gee, I think we might actually want to grab some data around that. We're trying really hard to set up any kind of data collection every step, we go.
I would add that data is definitely something that I think we need, not just for our program, but to attract additional partners to the table, whether it's an actual home repair program partner or another funder to buy into the vision that we're trying to lay out here. So on top of just tracking the general types of home repairs, we don't hold any PII information. So our partners are really doing a lot of this work and providing this information to us in aggregate. But the reports that we get are related to, cost, race, income, housing type, home repair type needs. I would say though that while those are all great, we're also trying to not just focus on the physical structure that residents dwell in, but their health is like the most important piece here. And so I would say between both Green and Healthy Homes Initiative and ProMedica, we're really together trying to create a new stream of funding for home repair. And the idea is that if we can continue to, measure the health outcomes of residents with these investments, then we should be able to understand, we should be able to get the healthcare system to also provide funding to do some of these home repairs. And, best guesstimates show that we should be able to potentially get 20% of those home repair needs met by healthcare providers, which will give us, every fifth house is a free house, essentially. But it also stretches our dollars further to do more home repairs. So it's a bit of physical, but also, just the actual person that we need to assist and like get information around so that we can continue advocating for more sustainable funding for home repair.
David, we're playing. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm good actually. Darnell said that great. I know we're running a little short on time, so yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I love that, Darnell, and my head still spins when I think back to the first time that Dr. Tony Reams brought that concept of, you should be able to go to a doctor and be prescribed weatherization for your house. but it's absolutely true, right? You've got so many of these issues and these social determinants of health that are based in our living, our dwellings and our living conditions. And so I think that's going to be a huge push for increasing the funding for these programs. And the other item that I wanted to add there, and I'll segue into Leslie, you got your hand up, but I love all the data that's being collected, and I know you all are data people. I personally would love to see more of a narrative built around this stuff. The data is great, but I think that this conversation today is a really good start to just turning this into a story and a success story, not about only the all of the benefits we've already talked about with housing insecurity and energy, health, comfort, but again also for climate. Housing policy is climate policy, right? We have to start drawing that connection, because without these home repair programs, we're not going to be able to effectively create more sustainability and decarbonize homes, which is important to the work we're doing. So, Leslie, I don't know if you had a comment or question.
Yeah, no, I had both comment and question. Like, I really appreciate this space and this conversation. I am just wondering, I invited one of my colleagues to participate in this conversation as well, because she's trying to revamp her house. I know Detroit Future Cities is working on sort of like the middle class African-American space, and the Wright Museum is going to be focusing on energy for the next 2 years. And I just wonder, like, is there a space or a conversation on helping middle class people connect to the resources, like Kerwin just talked about, like the home repair program? Is there like a stream that maybe the museum can help to like either push people towards to actually do these climate actions, and or like create a space where maybe there's a few pilot people that can go through some of these as we're developing it, so that lessons learned or war stories or best practices can kind of be then captured and helped to pave the way for other people. So I think that's sort of my question.
I really appreciate that question, because I mean, well, I'll quote Heather. Basically, I remember when Renew Detroit launched, and residents were filling out applications, and someone said, "Oh, I see. I'm poor, but I'm not piss poor. Like, I'm not poor enough to like receive these types of funds, so that I can help, my family." And you're exactly right. I mean, I think Detroit News, or Detroit Free Press, also on top of Detroit Future City, also made this comment about, if we don't prioritize the middle class, then there won't be one in Detroit. I think that there are things on the horizon that will help address the needs of lower middle class and middle class residents here in the city, or just residents who are just kind of right out of that, like just don't meet the outcome goals of like a HOPE application. Like those, we are actively thinking about that. Gwen Gale from the Rocket Community Fund was working to get ahead of the home repair program, working to get a pilot stood up with some residents who didn't qualify for HOPE, but really needed home repair, because like all the data tells us that most homeowners are one home repair from being like displaced, because money is money and everything costs more today. So as far as an actual product that exists today from the Detroit Home Repair Fund, we don't have that, but I think that there are products being developed to address that need, just not yet. But David probably have other comments.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that there are a number of council people in the city of Detroit that I know hammer me every single time they see me, and they're like, we're still looking for the not HOPE level program. And so I want to call out Pro Tem Tate's office, because it's been consistent. And it's painful because I know I don't have an answer right now in terms of like an actual product that you can say, go here. Because everybody is asking for a grant program. We know that the 0% home loan exists. We know it needs a revamp. And so I think that's one of the things that the city is looking at and thinking about. How can we be really, really creative like this? I mean, I also think in times of inflation like what we're experiencing right now, people are probably starting to realize how beneficial it is even to have a 0% home loan, but it doesn't change the fact that there's more than just people at a hope income level that need help. And so I think a lot of us are looking at it, and I'm glad that it's not just government and not just philanthropy. I think it's all of us collectively that are saying like, okay, how do we put other things in place that maybe aren't at the level of assistance where it's like 100% grant, but what are the other options that we have? So hopefully that's something that can be represented in whatever the right is doing. And maybe by the time they finish that, hopefully there will be something there.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, Leslie, is and to me this isn't middle class. This is still pretty low income, but that's why we expanded EEA to also address those at 201 to or 200 to 300% FPL, to try to get at those, that they would refer to them as maybe the ALICE population, asset limited, income constrained, employed customer segment, just because we had customers that were falling just outside, and if you're at 250% of the federal poverty level, that's still, you're still struggling. But yeah, for the middle class, I mean, I think that's a good comment. There's nothing specific at this point in time that I'm aware of, although I know with all the federal dollars going around electrification, the greenhouse gas reduction, and everything else, there's going to be, I think, more rebates and higher rebates available for everyone. So.
Great, thank you. And I guess just to plant some seeds, the Wright Museum will be kick-starting a big energy oral history project probably in August of 2023. So if there's any way that we can align some of these messages or stories or resources, the Wright Museum would be very interested to help to like push people towards actions.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. I appreciate it. And that's a resource that we need to be leveraging. And again, goes back to that storytelling and developing the narrative. All right, so I've got Gibran with his hand up. I'll ask if you can make a quick question, and then we'll just leave a few minutes for everybody to make a quick closing comment. Gibran, if you're still there, or just looking for the mute button.
Hey, did you say my name?
I see your hand up, but if not, that's fine. Hello?
Hello? Darn. Poor network quality. Hold on. So I might have to type it in chat. I got bad. My apologies.
No worries.
If you can't hear me, my question is, I'm working on a project. It's not just for me, but I'm just asking: is it an opportunity to like set something up or to consider how we can kind of get to that universal assessment that we all kind of would kind of benefit from, and if so, can that universal assessment? What are the parameters and what are the aspects of it that need to be included to consider the decarbonization and electrification, and like kind of rating that out as we're doing all these homes, so that we can start to build this bank and score base of like, okay, this home is at level 5 to decarbonization, this home is at level 3 to electrification, because I think we're at that synergy point now where we're almost, you can see where people are working together and it's coming together, but we kind of need to like think about that and like put that in the bud, so to speak, so that as we go forward, it's not scattery, because that would be something that would be helpful for the people, the panel right here, to like sit down with a smaller group. And maybe it's just defining what it is so that the bigger players involved, like yourselves, and the new funds to come down can like kind of help to shape and determine what would be the most valuable for that, and then allow some smaller project that's already like funded to work on like scoping that out and getting it right. Then we can like take a little bit from everybody's program to test it out and say, hey, how does this look, so we can score that. That would be, I think, pretty significant. So sorry about my connection.
Gibran, can you help us make that happen?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm actively on a project with a partner. Yeah, so I just need to get you all you in the room, and I send you so you can kind of help to make sure we're not like over duplicating. But yeah,
No,
Yeah.
for sure. And yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely on our radar, especially with EA. And it's what we did with the Detroit Repair Fund. We're leveraging that Pronto form to capture everything across the board, which is great. But then across the EA with the Weatherization Assistance Partners, they have their own system that they're using, and nonprofits might have their own system. And so we're trying to figure that out as well. That's a nut we're trying to crack with as little pain on all those involved to kind of move everyone over to the same system. But I agree with you, and at the very least, we're trying to have it all go to one database so we can at least collect all the data, because most of these systems all have like a good export function, so we can at least all have the data at least centralized. Because
Yep.
I'll just say selfishly for DT, it'd be great across EA if we could look at all of our projects and say, okay, here's all the need, here's all that we identified, here's all we could do, here's all we couldn't do, identify those gaps, and then braid in other resources when they become available potentially. It's kind of like that true north of where we're trying to get to. But I completely echo
Okay.
your comments though, for sure. I
All right.
appreciate
And
that.
if maybe Heather, you could even like, I mean, I guess the one missing to me, based on what I can tell, would be like the housing network. That would be that other like entity part that would kind of be missing.
And we're
I,
working.
I promise this is a very, I looked at Gwen's when she pulled it together, and I think we're all talking about how do we create that basis. So I was just having this conversation literally before I came up here to get on this panel, which is like, someone was like, oh, it sounds like the Common App for college. And I did not know that now kids nowadays, there's literally a Common App and you don't have to do, so it's the exact same idea. I think we're all bought into that idea of how do we figure out what the clear basis is where everybody's looking at the same thing, and then we just got to figure out how we all have our own add-on, because no one's gonna challenge that we all have little different things that we got to look at, but we're all looking at largely the same things. And if we find a way to do that, then we've already solved part of that workforce issue, actually, because
agree.
that's part of it, is we're all struggling to hire those people that do those assessments even to begin the process. So absolutely.
What Heather and David said.
Well, with that, it is 12:30 on the dot. I first off, thank you all so much, Heather, Michele, Darnell, David. This conversation could go on. My brain is already moving to this needs to be like a full day conference in the summer of next year when we've got this stuff moving, especially when we got all these IRA funds coming through, and these programs are just going to keep getting bigger. So I appreciate all of your time, and everybody who's in the audience. Thank you for asking all these great questions. Let us know what you think. Email Kendall and I if you've got feedback or questions you'd like to see in the future. We're going to keep this conversation going. So thank you again for all of your great work, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ben. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
y'all.
Enjoy the beautiful weather while we have it.
Awesome call, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
See y'all.
Thank you for having us. Great meeting.
Thanks, Kerwin.